Welcome to The Way Home with Laura Smith, the show that brings you wonderful guests, helpful advice, and uplifting stories. The Way Home. Live inspired. Here's your host, Laura Smith.
Well, I do what is called a lifestyle radio program every Sunday here on The Way Home, and Mondays too. And it always interests me that there are other people out there in the world that are doing similar things to what I am doing. But it's not that many anymore that have a variety show on the weekend that's not niche oriented. That's not maybe about finances or about technical things or politics, niche topics, just the old-fashioned variety show. It's something that I do, and also Ed Kalegi. He has a show on every weekend. It's syndicated. It's called The Weekend with Ed Kalegi, and he has had some amazing artists on his show, stars, and some of them are even worldwide stars, but also people in politics and people who have written books as well. Just kind of similar content to mine. But he has done himself. He has decided to write a book about all the people he's interviewed. And it's called It Was Great to Say Hello To, a curious radio host's conversations with actors, authors, and newsmakers. And boy, it is well done. It's a beautiful book. You want to hear what it's like to talk directly to Carol Burnett or Dick Cavett, maybe Brooke Shields. So many people in this book, and so fascinating. He takes the excerpts from some of his best interviews that he's ever done, and he puts them in here. Then he writes it within a context of what it was like to be with them and the kind of people they are and the history of the breadth of their work and everything. What a beautiful book this is by Ed Kalegi. That's all coming up, plus good news stories on the way home by Jim Cleefield at the very end. He is our guru of good news, and nothing ends a program like that. So when we come back, we're going to hear from Ed Kalegi and all about his new book, It Was Great to Say Hello To.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Way Home with Laura Smith. Here's Laura.
Well, in my 28th year of doing radio now, I have found that over the years, some of the most interesting people to talk to are actually people in my own business, which is not my own business, but the business of radio. But it's not often I come across someone with a similar path and similar interests and talents, and also even just the same path that we walked to get to where we are. And on Facebook, which is, I always say I'm not a big lover of the Facebook, but for radio purposes, it's been an amazing opportunity to meet people I probably would not have had the chance to meet before. But I would have probably had a chance to hear Ed Kalegi because he's been in the business as long as I have, or actually longer. And he has a wonderful weekend show. And like this one, it's a lifestyle show. It's not an angry political show. It is not a sports show or niche programming. It is lifestyle programming where he has interviewed some of the most amazing people on the planet. And he's written a book now to tell all about it. It's called It Was Great to Say Hello To, a curious radio host's conversation with actors, authors, and newsmakers. You're one yourself, Ed Kalegi. Thank you so much for joining me.
Laura, it is an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your show. This is wonderful.
Well, every weekend you post who your guests are. I do the same thing. And after a while, you get to see, wow, it's so amazing what some people are doing. And then you start going, wow, I didn't get that person on my show. Maybe I need to do that. No, I am not stalking your guests, but we have had some of the same ones. Ed, this book is really good. It's wonderful. Yeah, you're not just a radio host. You're a great writer. And the beautiful way in which you've presented, It Was Great to Say Hello To, for people who haven't had the chance to hear his program on the weekends, he always starts off by saying, hey, it's great to talk to, and then he introduced the guest. And so that's his signature, and it's kind of a throwback. It reminds me of stuff that we used to see back in the day, whether it was Johnny Carson, or in your case, you loved Dick Cavett. People with that kind of thing, they had a shtick, they had a line that they would use, and that is yours. And you go on to present not only some of the actual verbatim interviews that you've had with some of the most interesting and vibrant stars of our time, but you have these rich and poignant kind of delving into who they are as human beings around these quotes from them. And I just found it so fascinating. I felt like I was getting to talk to Dick Van Dyke myself. It was so good. Ed, this is a great book, and it just came out like recently.
2 weeks ago. So November 18th, I think, was publication day. So we're 2 weeks into this wonderful literary journey, and it's been quite interesting, to say the very least.
Well, it all started, didn't a psychic on one of your TV offerings that you were doing back in the 90s or something, she predicted you were going to write a book?
It was in 2009, and I had a show on what was then called Uba TV, and it was the very early incarnations of streaming television. And one day, I'm in the makeup room, and there was a medium who was a guest of someone else, and she pulls me over, and she says, "You're going to write a book one day." And I remembered it, but I kind of put it away and I didn't pay much attention to it. And then I remembered that as I was writing this book, and it's like, I need to find this person and ask her what next week's Powerball numbers are, because she knew what she was talking about. And it's interesting because I never thought that a radio show would lead to a book. About 2 years ago, and she is now my wonderful literary agent. Her name is Diane Nine, and she is headquartered down in Washington. She was providing guests for my show, and she said, "Did you ever think about writing a book?" Because I had just crossed the threshold of having my 1,000th guest on the show. Wow. So, so it's an idea. So at first I thought this was going to be transcriptions. Ed said this, guest said that. People have done that, and they were successful with it. And she said, no. You know how to talk. You know how to express yourself. Can you write? Go back, listen to them, and write about them. And that's what I did. And it turned the process into a very long process, 2 years, but it was worth every second of it, because it turned out to be something that I'm very proud of and that I really didn't know what I could do. And when I went back and I listened to these interviews and wrote about them, I realized just how much I enjoy what I'm doing, and that I'm so lucky to do what I'm doing. And you and I are kindred spirits. We love a good conversation. We love this medium. We love the history of it. We love what it can still be. And to me, this book is a celebration of that. And from when I was a kid watching Dick Cavett on a 5-inch snowy black and white screen in my room to now, it's simply a celebration of all of that.
Well, and it is a beautiful celebration. And, not that I'm any great writer myself, but I have to say, like, even just your introduction, which was quite long, I relished it. It was beautifully just full of depth. It was really full of depth, but also so much humor that it kept you up and laughing about how your life started. And then I was seeing my life and yours, and how you said at 10 years old, you had a 9-volt battery and a walkie-talkie in your bedroom, and that was your very first radio show.
Yeah.
And when I was 10 years old, I was living in Australia at the time, and we had these people on the radio, and they were saying they were doing these contests, and they were telling you, call in now. And so I was I was practicing radio then too. And then many years later, I was at some kind of personal growth retreat, and there was, it was all about finding your purpose in life and everything. And the person said in the book, what you were playing when you were 10 years old is truly who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that amazing, because you were doing it, I was doing it. We were playing radio at 10.
And it's funny because when we do it now professionally, we still get that feeling that we had when you were 10 years old in Australia and I was 10 years old in New Jersey. And it's a fire that lives within you that you can never extinguish and you never want to extinguish. And it's just, you feel like you're in your zone and you're doing what you're meant to do. And part of the introduction in the book is my journey, because once I left college, I kind of went astray. I went into the corporate world. I worked at a marketing company and I ran my own souvenir products company for a while. And I ended up falling down an escalator one day and hurt my back. And that was the end of running the business of these giant shirt presses and everything else. And credit to my wife, who said, you know what, why don't you go back and do what you always wanted to do? And I got back into the industry, and slowly but surely I was able to put together a decent enough career. And then I was able to get this show back in 2014. And it's just been a wonderful ride. And I love being able to speak to people and find things out about people. I have always been an incredibly curious person, and a lot like what you do. When I talk to someone, I try to find something kind of beyond the surface, something that no one else would ask. And I think that's key to a great conversation. Try to learn more about the person you're speaking with, especially when it's a celebrity that everybody knows. Try to find something unique about that person. And for me, that's what's always worked.
And, it's interesting, but a lot of the excerpts that you include from your interviews that you had done with some of the biggest names, Dick Cavett, Norman Lear, Dick Van Dyke, Brooke Shields, you just have so many, Carol Burnett. Many of them would say in these literal verbatim quotes to you that no one's ever asked me that before. And that's a gift.
Yeah.
That is a gift, because not everybody has that. A lot of people go for the typical, this is what I've heard in the news about what you're doing or whatever. But you don't. You go for the real story, and you go for the human being. And when you read all these various chapters that you have, you feel like afterwards that you have met them too. Or that's how I felt. I felt like, oh, I just talked to Carol Burnett, and now I know who she was as a human being, or who she is as a human being. Same with Dick Van Dyke. And you and I have both talked to Todd Rundgren, so that's always a fascinating ride.
Sure.
And but you go on. You have others that you talk to politicians. You run the gamut, and in many ways, you're like me. I've had a psychic show. I've had a lifestyle show. I've had a health show. I've had all these types of shows. But these people, even though they are celebrities, we forget sometimes that they're just regular people. And
indeed, yes.
And you picked out the golden nuggets within your interviews and then wrote around them to give context. And it's beautiful, it's poignant, it's funny, and I absolutely recommend the book to anyone. It was great to say hello to A Curious Radio Host's Conversations with actors, authors, and newsmakers. And you are one yourself. Hey, you and I have one other thing in common.
Yeah.
We hated doing traffic.
Oh, my goodness.
If there was one part of the business, I said, please, I got down on my knees when I got to this new radio station. I said, don't make me do traffic. I said, I'm not good. I'm not good.
I did that for 12 years. I was an afternoon traffic person in New York City. It paid the bills. It was a way for me to get into New York radio, because for me, every stop along my broadcast journey allowed me to go somewhere else. So you know what? I don't besmirch it for that. But we live in an age now, Laura, when you turn on the radio, you really don't care if a truck 60 miles from where you are broke down somewhere. And it was very, for me, redundant, almost manically redundant to keep 15 minutes at the Lincoln Tunnel, 10 minutes at the George Washington Bridge. And I'm a creative person at heart, and so are you. And I just wanted to be able to do more. And you're restricted in doing that. There is only so much you can do. And that's why I was just looking for an opportunity and an avenue where I could kind of use my curiosity and my ability to communicate, if I'm any good at it, to be able to do it. And yes, but it was kind of it was a rough go for 12 years to talk about broken down trucks on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway.
Which are always there all the time.
They're always there.
Like you said in your book, you just copy and paste it to 12 years later, and it's the same story.
Yes.
But, yeah, phenomenal. But that's not, again, I know Matt Ward from Shadow Traffic. He was the first traffic guy I ever worked with almost 30 years ago. And what an amazing person he is, an amazing voice in New York and everything. So it's like, it's not to say that, but it's just that what that did was it led you to find what really sparks your soul.
Indeed. And you know what? I should thank Matt. Matt was one of the people who hired me back at Shadow Traffic back in 2010. And you know what? If there was no 12 years at Shadow Traffic, I wouldn't have had the inkling. I wouldn't have had the exposure on New York radio. So you know what? It all worked out, and it was all for the best anyway. So
you're grateful for all of it, for sure.
Indeed, yes.
We have something else in common as well. We were both theater people. I got my BFA in theater, and I went to Adelphi University on Long Island, where interestingly enough, I only went into the radio station once in my 4 years there. And it just happens to be that that's where Gary Delabate, Baba Booey, He and I graduated the same year, and so he was in the radio station all the time. I was in the theater all the time. So we didn't really know each other then. We know each other now. But, you did acting as well. So on top of all of your vast radio interviews that you've done in your life, you're also an actor, and people have probably seen you in hundreds of episodes of everything.
I was very fortunate because I ended up doing a great deal of background acting. So, yes, the other night I was kind of just playing around on the Roku, and I ended up seeing myself in an old episode of Gossip Girl walking by in the background. And I'm thinking, boy, I looked so much better in 2010 than I do now. But I did so much of that. And it was great because it got me union work and all kinds of other things, but there was nothing like live theater, because every time you do an individual play or a musical, every night when you do it, and you know this, it's a different production, because theater is so organic and you feed off of the reaction of the audience and your fellow actors. And it's not like, oh, okay, cut, let's do it again. You can't do it again. But there is a vibrancy about theater. And I think that for anyone that goes on really in anything in life after doing theater, it helps you so much because it keeps you on your toes, because there is nothing more exciting or more frightening than having to do a 2-hour play in front of 372 people. And for me, it was a wonderful way to jumpstart what I wanted to do in quote unquote show business. So and I think back to my time in high school. I can still remember what that theater sounds like, and I can still remember what that theater smells like. And actually, next month, I'm going back to my high school, and we'll stand on that very stage and talk to the students about this book. So that's going to be quite a trip for me to be able to do that.
Oh, my goodness. That is really full circle stuff. You were in Bye Bye Birdie. I was in Once Upon a Mattress, speaking of Carol Burnett. And I played Winifred, and you played the Paul Lynde character in Bye Bye Birdie.
Harry McAfee, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then you go and have an interview with the amazing, great Dick Van Dyke, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. He brings me joy just to see his face and hear his voice. He just opens my heart. He makes me feel like everything is possible in life. And you got to talk to him for quite a while.
And he was great because, Laura, here is someone who was obviously on the 18th hole of life, but he's still going for the green. He loves it. And there's a comment in the book he brings up about how all of his contemporaries have passed on. So what does he do? He finds new contemporaries and new friends, and he stays active. And if you go on YouTube, he has a singing group. They are an a cappella singing group, and they're singing left and right. And he's always enjoying life. And it's a wonderful lesson for anyone to be able to just embrace whatever your situation is and get the most out of it and live every drop out of life. And as he approaches 100 years old, he was just one of the most vibrant people I ever had on the show. And there's such a wonderful paradox in that.
There truly is, and very multi-talented, but it's a great spirit, and I think he attributes part of it to his spirituality. So some of these wonderful, beautiful excerpts in your book from these talks that you had verbatim with some of the biggest stars in the world, they're really just they're just like, it's incredible to hear them speaking from their own words and not just as an actor with lines, but who they are as human beings, what makes them tick, what frightens them, what brings them joy, and great life lessons like Dick Van Dyke. Chaz Palminteri, you and I have both interviewed him. He's a super nice guy, super down to earth. I just saw him. He came out here to Indiana. He was in New Buffalo, or Indiana, or Michigan. And he was in New Buffalo at the casino there. And this was literally just like a month and a half ago. And he did A Bronx Tale as a one-man show. And I thought, how is it possible? I think he's 72 now. And he's doing this hour-and-a-half show. Every line, every action, every part, every female, every male, his mother, his father. He's playing all these beautiful parts. And he still got it. And it just... Those people are rare gems, I think, in the business. And yet when you talk to them like you have and I have, they're regular people. Yeah.
And it's funny, when I had him on the show and we were talking about his journey, and he recounted about how it began as this one-person show in Los Angeles, and it was very popular, and he was offered money for it, but they didn't want him to play himself in the movie, so he passed on it. And then one day Robert De Niro comes back and says, you know what, I'll produce it. You're going to play Sonny. I'm going to play your father. And it all worked out for him. And as he recounted that story to me so many years later, he paused, and you could tell that he got a little emotional because he still can appreciate his own journey and how he held out for what he thought mattered because he cared so much about that show. And the fact that you're able to see him now do that at 72, where he plays every one of those parts. And there is so much texture to each one of those characters that he gives life to. It's incredible, but it just goes to show it's his story. He is Calodro. That's who he was. And it just, to me, it blows me away. But it shows when there is something deep inside your heart that you love and that you believe in, it matters so much to you. And he personifies that in so many ways.
And to have the courage, and the same as Sly Stallone did the exact same thing with Rocky.
Right.
They were both broke completely. They had like $400 to their name or $200, whatever. And they were offered like up to $1 million for the show, but they didn't want them to play the lead roles. And it happened to both of them. And they both held out. And look what happened.
It's very hard to say no to all that money when you don't have any money. But when you're holding on to a dream because you believe in it so much and you think you can take it further, that's a very hard thing to do.
Absolutely. And your career has been so varied. You've also been like what do you call it? The announcer in the stadiums. What do you call that again?
It's funny. Some people call it the voice of God because it's the big voice you hear when you sit in a stadium. It's a public address announcer. And I was fortunate to do that. Yeah, in New York City. I did it for the Staten Island Yankees, which was a minor league affiliate of the New York Yankees. And they played in a wonderful, beautiful ballpark in the not oceanfront, but the Bayfront in Staten Island. I did that for the New Jersey Devils for a while, and then I did it for New York Roadrunners, and I was kind of the host of the opening ceremonies of the New York City Marathon for a few years. But that was a lot of fun. I love doing that as well. And live events are great to work.
And there's a sense of humility that when I'm reading your book, I hear from you that it makes all the sense in the world that you've gotten to where you've gotten. People always claim that, oh, so-and-so is an overnight sensation or he's just a star. No, it's the steps that you've gone through. When you read your story about some of the gigs you took that were so obscure and so out of the limelight at the time that you took them, but you did them for a reason, and it led you to other things that you couldn't have even imagined. So I think that's great advice. That's a great, I taught at the university level in where my alma mater, at Delphi University in New York, and I would teach the students kind of life after college, this whole trajectory and, how to look at it. Because when I was going through it myself, it was a constant panic or worrying or, I'm not getting there. I'm not doing whatever. Right. You don't know what you're doing. And I tried to tell them how, just take the little things and eventually you will get to your dream if it's important to you.
Indeed.
Some people do it for a little bit and they go, it's not really for me. When I started in radio 28 years ago, I had no idea where it was going to go. I just no idea whatsoever. Did I ever think that 30 years later I would be enjoying it more than I ever could have imagined? And the same with you.
Right. And I think it's very important to live in sort of a state of expectation and to keep your dream alive. And to me, I think I've had some help from above because I kept my faith and I just kept very in tune with where I wanted to be. And I did an interview a few years ago and I ended up saying something and it kind of stayed with me, that there is always a next. As long as you keep believing in what you want to do and where you think you want to end up being, one thing always leads to another. And as I was writing that book and you brought up the introduction, which is pretty much kind of like this schematic roadmap of where my career started and wherever it is right now. But I noticed that literally it's like it's a treasure map. It's like we went from here to there to here to there. And it all makes sense because each built upon the next. And it was wonderful. And you just simply have to live in expectation and always believe that deep in your heart, you're doing the right thing and that you have this purpose inside you for a reason. And I think that's an incredibly great way, not just to go about your career, but to kind of live your life as well.
For sure. And I would say that 99% of where I am and what I'm doing has everything to do with my faith and God, and, because it gets hard sometimes. I think about doing those overnights. I wanted to be at Light FM in New York City in the worst way. And I used to sit down and write it in a notebook. I am at 106.7 Light FM. I would write it thousands of times. And lo and behold, I end up at Light FM on the overnights for 6 years. But I was still there.
You were there.
Yes. And there's times when it's 5 a.m. and you literally feel like you're going to fall asleep between songs. But you get through it and you learn and you grow and you just feel joy that you got there and you go, you know what? Someone up there is looking out for me. Yeah. And a lot of it is that too. So it's a beautiful thing. And again, my guest is Ed Kalegi, and he has written a fantastic book. It's called It Was Great to Say Hello To, a Curious Radio Host's Conversations with Actors, Authors, and Newsmakers. You really have, who are some of your favorite all-time guests? And it doesn't have to be one or two. It can be 5 or 6.
I think I have to start that list with Dick Cavett, because for me, he was the person who I would watch when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. No 6 and 7-year-olds were watching Dick Cavett except for me, but I loved the way he talked with people. And Cavett, for me, had the big three. He had intelligence, and he had wit, and he had the ability to communicate. And if you can do that, if you have that trifecta, you have it all. And the way in which he did it, and even to this day, he is so comfortable in his own skin. And when I first got the show, the network that first syndicated the show said, well, is there somebody you would like to get on the show? And I thought, let's go for the gusto here. Yeah, Dick Cavett. They reached out to him at the New York Times. He came on 3 weeks later. And it was supposed to be a 10-minute conversation, and we talked for like 45 minutes, and it was absolutely wonderful. And Laura, it was a pinch me moment, because here it was. I was talking to the one person who made me do what I wanted to do. And when he relaxed with me and he said, do you have to go through your life saying Kalegi spelled the usual way? And boom, to me, that was it. You know what? The dream had come true. He was fascinating. I spoke with Dean Koontz, the master of suspense. And he talked about how 5 days a week he's always writing from 8:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. And I just thought the man is such a voracious writer. And just to listen to and hear some of the stories from people, there have just been so many over the years. Lorraine Bracco was a wonderful interview. We mentioned Chaz Palminteri. Julie Andrews was a joy. I had Mitch McConnell on the show when he put out his autobiography. And we didn't talk about politics. We talked about the most trouble he got in as a kid, which was in 1955. His uncle had passed away. They were having the wake in the next room, but Mitch snuck away because even living down south, he was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, and he was huddled up next to the radio listening to the Dodgers play the Yankees in the World Series, and his father came in and caught him doing that during the funeral in the house. But I didn't know we were going there. It's all of these little nuggets that you can kind of pull out of people. And the key, I think, Laura, and you know this, it's not talking, it's listening. Listen to the guests and hear what they're saying and react and take it from there. I don't script out questions. I never did. I never will. And I learned that from Cavett. I have a couple of bullet points here and there. I don't know where the conversation is going to go. When you're on the line at the supermarket and you start chatting with the person behind you because the line is too long, that's not a scripted conversation. You don't know where it's going to go. And those are the best conversations of all.
They are indeed, and you have so many of them. And boy, I've been amiss. I haven't even spoken the name of your show every weekend. It's The Weekend with Ed Kalegi. And you get so much packed into one show. How many hours? Is it 3 hours?
It's 3 hours in some places. It's 2 hours in other places. So each hour is independent of its own, so everybody can take what they want. And I have to give credit to a series of wonderful publicists that I have worked with now for almost 10 years in New York and Los Angeles and in D.C. People such as Terry Cater and Jeff Abraham and Dan Harari and Danny Duraney. And I'm not going to name them all, and I feel bad, but I list them all in the book. But they are the pipeline of fertile guests, and it's great because that's the lifeblood of the show. And it's great to be able to work with people that believe in what you do and trust their clients to you. And I've just been very, very fortunate with this.
Well, I would liken your show to a TV variety show from the 60s and 70s. in that you get so much. You get everything. You get the comic laughter. You get the human foibles. You get the punchlines. You get the wonderful stars. You know, you have all of that going on in your weekend show, and it is not common anymore. People say, what kind of radio do you do? Is it politics? Is it this? I'm like, no, it's just a conversational weekend lifestyle show with wonderful people that inspire me and inspire others. And, you know, that's not that common anymore.
No, it's not. And I'm very glad you said that, because there is a place for this type of radio, for what I do, for what you do. There is an opening for this to come back in a big way. And I think what I patterned myself off of, I'm not nearly as good as these people. I was influenced by Larry King and Tom Snyder on the radio when I was in college. And when you would put Larry King on, he'd have Don Rickles one night. He'd have John Dean the next night. The next night, he'd have this woman that had a lint collection, and she lived in Omaha. You didn't know who or what he would be talking about, but it was always interesting, and it was eclectic, and it is like a variety show. And when you have a singer on, or you have an author on, or a best-selling author who has written about something very important in terms of someone's everyday life, we'll tackle issues on the show as well, because it's all part of life. Because life is a smorgasbord. And I think that any kind of entertainment has to reflect that as well. And that's why, in my little corner of the world, that's what I try to do.
And I love it. And obviously millions of people love it as well. Ed Kalegi, it was great to say hello to a curious radio host's conversations with actors, authors, and newsmakers. Ed Kalegi. Kalegi is spelled Kalegi, Ed Kalegi, and you can get it on Amazon just like I did. And it's a great, great read, and his show is a great listen. Thank you so much. You have blessed me with your wonderful presence and the gift that you give to the world every day, and for being so open about how you got there, your humanity and the beautiful tidbits in your introduction and the rest of the book as well. It really gives insight, and you have your great humility, but your really awesome talent on so many levels. Thank you, Ed, so much, and congratulations on the book.
Laura, you are incredibly gracious and kind, and it is absolutely fantastic to join you on this show. Thank you so much for those kind words. I really enjoyed this.
Well, I feel honored as well. EdKalegi.com is his website. Check it out.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Way Home with Laura Smith. Here's Laura.
One of the most compelling characters and human beings of all time, I think, is Harry Houdini. And I didn't know much about him, but I have good friends who actually knew him personally, or their father did or something. And so there's tales of that woven within the family lore. But we have a new book, and it's something that is going to absolutely, I think, get you so interested. And you're going to get it. You won't want to put it down. Houdini's Last Handcuffs is written by none other than a brother and sister team, Charlie and Cheryl Young. They are here today. They've written this historical-based novel together. And I am telling you, it just sounds like it's the stuff that magic is made of. What am I going to say? Thank you so much for joining us today on The Way Home.
So glad to be here.
Now, first of all, is this your first book? Now, together, are you in business together and other things? I know you own several things and music companies and things like that, but is this the first time you've ever written something together?
Yes, this is.
This is our debut novel.
Your debut novel. And it's interesting because when I saw the title and then I heard that the brother and sister duo, for some reason I was thinking that like these young hipsters, 20-year-olds, because, it sounded like such a cool title, Houdini's Last Handcuffs. And then I love that you guys are actually seasoned writers in the sense that you know so much about this topic now, being that it's a historically based novel. How much of Houdini's Last Handcuffs is made up of things that you have just thrown in there to make the story interesting, and how much of it is actual history, and why is it that you chose Houdini as the main focus of your book?
Yes, well, we were entrenched in a magical family growing up. Our father had known Houdini as a young man. Houdini had offered to sponsor him to get into the Society of American Magicians after watching my father do a magic act. And my father went on and became a physician, which is also what I became. But then my father wrote magic books because of his lifelong interest in magic, and he became one of his co-authors was ended up being one of Houdini's personal secretaries.
Right.
That was Walter Gibson, and Walter Gibson had gone on and become the writer of the Shadow novels, which was who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men, the Shadow knows. And so Walter and Walter's wife, who was also had been on stage with her previous husband, the great Raymond, read our palms when we were growing up, had a rooster she brought to our home, who was part of the magic act. So our whole family upbringing was part of this, including seances, because Houdini's, when Houdini died, he was very into the afterlife. Spiritualism, yes, and wanted to be able to contact his mother, and he had set up that with his wife that if anybody could come back, he would. And so that after he died, his wife held seances for 10 years trying to contact him. And when she finally said, okay, I'm not going to do this any longer, she turned it over to Walter Gibson. And Walter continued this for decades. And our father participated in this along with our mother in these seances while we were growing up. So we were very much part of this whole magic scene and what went on.
That is absolutely mind-bending to think about. My guests are Charlie and Cheryl Young. They're a brother and sister duo that have written the most fascinating book, Houdini's Last Handcuffs. And what you're hearing them describe the book, it's interesting because it is a novel. So they've been able to weave their own exciting story. It takes place with a Ouija board, some kids, and all sorts of, but it does bring in the history also, some of the historical nature of Houdini and his tricks, not to mention science, math. What was the other? Cryptography, did I hear? What is that?
Yes, there was, we spend, there's one chapter called The Code Room. Our mother was...
the notebook is written in code.
Yes, and that's why. So we had to enlist a group of people to decipher the codes. And our mother happened to actually have been trained as a cryptographer and had for the WACS, which was the United States Army for women for World War II, and had gone overseas as a cryptographer to decipher codes. She had been loaned to the British for that in World War II. So in our story, she leads the group of people to help decipher Houdini's notebook.
Right.
Well, your life sounds almost as fantastical as your novel, and even more so. What an incredible life you both grew up in. Are you only siblings, or were there more?
Just us, just the two of us. And it was a very, very special childhood.
I mean, it just sounds like you could even write an autobiography of the two of you of what your life was like. And it is something that I don't think many people can even imagine. But I find it so great that you've turned all this creativity and all this history of your family and Houdini and turned it into a novel, which apparently you are following up with a sequel. Is that true?
Yes. We the book is it is a complete book in itself, but we were having so much fun writing it that we thought that we had more to tell. I mean, we do have a lot of experiences to draw on from our youth, and a lot of interesting people that we met, and of course New York City in the late 1950s. and the sequel will go into the early 60s. So it was quite a place to be growing up.
It almost sounds like it would be an incredible Netflix series or something like that.
I think it would. It would be so cool. Yeah.
Well, I hope you option it for that, because it sounds like it could really draw upon so many fascinating aspects of his life and, like you said, even the backdrop of New York City in the 1950s.
So our code breakers include Eleanor Roosevelt, Eli Wallach, Walter Gibson, Orson Welles, Eartha Kitt, Artie Shaw. These are all people who are part of our code room and working.
Or in the story. They're not all in the code room.
Right. In the story,
yes.
Or in the code room.
You've incorporated them as such. How exciting. I just think the whole thing sounds absolutely magical. And again, terrible pun, but Houdini's Last Handcuffs is a book that I think anyone, it sounds like almost of any age, can enjoy. Now, is this, there are children that are part of the protagonists in the story. Is this basically for any age group, or do you have a recommendation?
It was written
young adults,
both the young adult and adult market.
Okay.
And that's what we had in mind, both markets.
Yeah, I think between, the mathematic aspect and the scientific and the magic all put together, that is something that sounds like it would be right up the alley of young adult fiction. And yet, again, for adults as well. You guys are such an interesting pair. And I'm so thrilled to have met you and to hear just even your own lives as magical as this book, Houdini's Last Handcuffs. The fact that the book is called Houdini's Last Handcuffs, why handcuffs? And well, obviously he probably used them in a lot of his tricks, but what does that mean to you both?
Well, interestingly, our father back in the 1940s was called in to Elsie Harding's home. She was Harding's widow. Harding was Houdini's brother, and Harding had inherited all of Houdini's magic apparatus. Harding was also a magician. And Elsie was selling the home in Brooklyn, and she knew my dad and asked him to come clean out some of the last things. And one of the last things he found in the basement, when he went, he felt, I just had to go back into the basement one last time. And then he saw tacked up onto the wall, like above eye level, a pair of handcuffs glinting at him. And he took them down and he took them back up to Elsie. He said, is this is this something special? Or she said, no, take those handcuffs. So he felt he had taken the last handcuffs from the Houdini Harding estate. And they were trick handcuffs. They are special handcuffs. And they were part of our home in his library, exhibited all through growing up. He wrote an article about them for the Linking Ring in 1992, which is the official organ of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. And when he died, we inherited these handcuffs, and that prompted us to say, wow, he always felt they were special, that they contained the spore of the brothers Houdini. And I felt we need to bring Houdini back to life. And we did.
I have goosebumps. That's really beautiful. Absolutely. Houdini's Last Handcuffs. And now we know what that means. Dua Lipa, who is a big, huge pop star. I think she's Albanian or Kosovoan. And her song that's big on the charts right now, because I'm a music disc jockey on a radio station, is called Houdini. So I think it only appropriate that I play a little bit of that as we leave. But we want people to find you and find this amazing book. It's gotten rave reviews, many different types of reviews, and they really get it. And they're loving Houdini's Last Handcuffs. Was Amazon? Do you have your own website that you'd like to plug as well for this?
We do. It's easy enough. HoudinisLastHandcuffs.com will get you there. And yes,
Perfect.
Amazon, of course, is a go-to pre-order right now, but order after March 26th. And Barnes & Noble. And if you go into a bookstore, they can order it for you. It's
Sure.
easily obtainable.
And people can also rediscover your father's book with Gibson, because I know on your own websites as well that you have access to selling that book as well, because that's a true account of Houdini that
Absolutely.
would be a great companion book. And I bet your parents, now, are they with us still, or have they gone to the great beyond?
No, unfortunately, they're both gone.
Well, I bet you they are smiling down from there with their children that, they're not young children, but you'll always be their children. And they must be absolutely grateful that you have written this beautiful book. And then I wouldn't doubt if Houdini himself is there also egging you on and just cheering you on. So congratulations on Houdini's Last Handcuffs. And to find the book, just go to Houdini'sLastHandcuffs.com from Cheryl and Charlie Young. And they are brother and sister duo on this historic and fiction novel that really I think this is going to be the hit of the season. And I can't wait to see it when it comes out eventually on some type of episodic, because I think it's going to. Congratulations. And thank you so much for being with us on the way home.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Way Home with Laura Smith. Here's Laura.
We were talking with Ed Kalegi about how our shows are typically known as variety shows. You, Jim, are one of those people that if there was a voice or a show host from back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, that would be you. I always feel like you could have been one of those guys on TV hosting the best game show on the planet, or even sportscast, type of thing on TV. You had all of that, but here you are with little old me in the radio studio.
And I'm very thankful for that, by the way. I'm thankful to be with you both.
Well, your sterling voice is absolutely beautiful, and it brings me joy just to hear it, kind of like Dick Van Dyke. When you hear his voice, you just smile. That's what I do when I hear yours. So I know you have a good news story for us today to end the program with.
I do.
What you got?
Well, this story is about a horse. You know that theme song, that opening on Mr. Ed? A horse is a horse, of course, right? Well, this is not just any horse I'm going to talk about, LJ. Actually, this one is a very dramatic rescue that happened just before Thanksgiving, as a matter of fact, November 27th in Colorado. That horse named Hank got stuck in a culvert, somehow fell in there. A very serious situation. And Dave Boudreaux's wife had discovered the horse in that culvert, was stuck in there. And you know what happened? And this is another one of those stories, LJ, where everybody rallies around them. They all come together to help, the whole community, the fire department, neighbors. There was a sign company, you name it, everybody just reaching in. The veterinarian was there to rescue this horse. And I'm happy to say, it just took everybody to lift that horse out. I'm sure it was a very stressful situation for Hank. And they were able to get that horse out safely. The veterinarian came in and had to sedate Hank, because I'm sure, he was very anxious, and just to kind of calm him down, was able to treat him. And I'm happy to say that Hank is in stable condition. That's certainly something for Hank's family to be very, very thankful for. What Dave Boudreaux's family is thankful for that. And he said this, he told a local broadcast station that I don't have kids of my own, but this horse, the cats and the dogs I have, they are my family. We talked about how pets are family. I can attest to this. And he just said, just heartfelt by the way that everybody came together to save my horse and to save his life, because this could have been a real tragic situation, because horses have a very delicate lifestyle. I know that it's like racehorses and things, but again, just goes to show you that these random acts of kindness and people coming together really do make a difference. And as I said, this family is very thankful that Hank is alive and well.
Absolutely. And you totally missed your most glorious of puns ever.
What's that?
You said he was in stable condition.
Stable, yes, that's right. That's true. Stable. I want to use stable very loosely. He is in stable condition, right. Thank you for saying that.
That's a wonderful story. And, no easy feat, for sure, to get something as big as a horse out of a situation like that. But thank goodness they did. I love all of those stories of rescuing animals. There are so many good ones. And, we just are grateful to the people who step in, even on these neighborhood websites, the Next Door thing and the Facebook neighborhood ones. And people are always commenting on there if they have found an animal and they're trying, or they'll take it in until they can get it to the humane shelter. And people really rally around trying to save these animals and people's pets, because they all have them themselves, and they know what it feels like to be losing them or worried about them or something. So it's great. It's a wonderful thing. Reminds me of that book, All Things Great and Small. Do you remember that? By the Scottish veterinarian, James Herriot.
Oh, okay.
He had All Things Great and Small, All Things Bright and Beautiful. And he had like a series of these, and it's all about, he was a country veterinarian in Scotland, back several decades. And it was so beautifully written. But that's what that reminds me of. It really brought together the relationship between man and animals.
Yeah. Well, I think in my case, that title, All Things Great and Small. Why am I thinking of Bob right now? Bob Small. That's a nice title for him. Don't you think?
You mean our producer?
It could have been written about him too. All Things Great and Small. Bob Small, that is.
By the way, I think his books came out nearly a century ago at this point.
Yeah.
James Herriot?
Yes. Yeah. I was watching it on public TV last night, their TV version of it, and the cars that they were driving, I was like, well, give it 80 or 90 years anyway.
Maybe, no kidding, maybe like the 30s or something.
Yes.
The 30s and 40s.
20s and 30s, yeah.
And those, I would recommend those books for any age person, for a child and adults. I mean, they're the most beautiful books. But yes, you are great and small. Our producer, who we love so much. So thank you both. And as we head on into what is a busy weekend, holiday-wise, people are preparing, and there are just so many wonderful things going on that people can take part in. We're just grateful to have you along on the show that hopes to make you feel good and inspired as well. Thanks, Bob and Jim, and to all of you listening. Have a wonderful week. Be safe, and lots of love from the way home. I'm Laura Smith.
Podcasts by Federated Media.